Hi, my name is Dean Lampman, and I am the vice chair of the church council. My wife, Michelle, and I have been members of Flower Mound United Methodist Church for about 15 years. This church has been a great blessing to both of us. Currently, I work at the American Heart Association, and throughout the pandemic, I have been fortunate to be able to work from home. So now let's move into the content for this session. Over the years, we have seen Flower Mound United Methodist Church change and evolve from a church starting out in the living room of our senior pastor to meeting in a school building and then to a small congregation in the fellowship hall to finally building a brand new sanctuary and receiving many new members in a time of dramatic growth. In each stage and phase of development, this church has been faithful to listening to who God needs us to be as a congregation serving the Flower Mound area. This means we have been transformed by God as He continues to create in us, bringing a new people into the church and by listening to the leading of the Holy Spirit. Like all organizations throughout the season of pandemic life, Flower Mound United Methodist Church has had challenges. We have met those challenges with resilience and creativity, and by believing God is creating anew through this time. One of the ways we stayed faithful through the season is to identify our values as a congregation. In 2021, we focused in on our values and how they defined us, not only in who we have been, but how they continue to lead us into the future to become who God needs us to be. Those values are: all creation belongs to God. Each person is a beloved child of God. The Holy Spirit gives us blessings to bless others. Our brave discipleship for Jesus transforms the world. These values offer a lifelong blueprint for how we live into God's grace. These values allow us to build upon them into deeper relationship with God and one another year after year. These values keep us in touch with the triune God who creates anew among us daily, claims us as beloved children, continues to pour blessings upon us, and calls us out into the world to share God's love with others. As we have lived into these values in 2021, it has helped us to steady ourselves when the world around us has been in chaos through change and uncertainty during the pandemic. As we keep living into these values, we believe God is helping us to move more deeply, to understand the holy love of God, and allowing us to love more wholly in our ministry. As such, this means we're in a process of listening and discernment all the time as leaders. We are living into these values, not expecting church and ministry to return back to the way it used to be, but recognizing that if we are faithful to our values, God will help us to become a new thing. This helps us to define expectations and priorities clearly. For instance, if we were to define the success of our church on continuing the trajectory we were on before the pandemic started, we would be continually disappointed and feeling defeated. COVID has changed not just the face of our congregation, but Christianity nationwide. Just look at the most recent statistics on the decline of mainline churches. From this Gallup poll, we see that though in-person attendance started to increase in May of 2021, it is well below pre-pandemic levels. Couple this with the decline of attendance throughout all religions since 1941, and we see that this is a trend that has actually been ongoing. The pandemic just exacerbated it. According to Barna Group, in April-May 2020, 1 in 3 Christians dropped out of the church completely during COVID-19, and church membership dropped below 50% of the population for the first time dating back to 1940. On the one hand, we could be discouraged about this and try to measure our performance and metrics based on what was happening and try to reach back into that time and be what we were. This will result in a lot of hand-wringing, anxiety, and disappointment. Instead, by living into our values, we can start to create the space to ask questions of what God is allowing us to become for the future. We know that God is our creator and has been at work through the church for more than 2,000 years. As recently as 1918, the church survived the pandemic, and it continually reinvented itself to become something new for the disciples of Jesus Christ. So if we believe in God as claiming all people as belonging to a holy image, can't we believe that God will find a way to keep blessing the church as we serve bravely? Our role is not to react with panic, not to expect what has been in the past, but instead to believe in God's creative work for the future. We can be realistic and hopeful at the same time. Our role is to live into our values and vision and to be focused on what God is asking our church to continue to become for the future. So this year, what we would like to do is ask you as leaders, please stop comparing our church to other churches. Don't panic about reaching numbers or unrealistic pre-pandemic metrics, and don't worry about what will happen to recreate the past. Instead, let us be leaders who look for, listen to, and lean into the ways God is working to create something new among us. The programs or procedures, expectations, or outcomes of the past are not a valid measure for the future. Let us trust God that as we live into our values as Christian leaders, by how we do ministry, the fruit of the Spirit will be visible to us as our witness in the world. How we do ministry right now is even more important than what we do. Our character, attitude, and approach will allow the church to thrive in the future. If we are thoughtful, observant, value-centered, and long-term minded, what we build on this blueprint of our values will matter for what is ahead in the church for years to come. This means adopting a mindset that is reflective, not reactive. But this is a mindset shift. It requires not to be reactive, but being reflective, and knowing that will take some time to get used to. Let's consider how questions are a biblical model to emulate. In the four Gospels, Jesus asked a total of 307 questions and answered only 8. Some of those questions are likely familiar to you. Luke 18:19. Why do you call me good? Mark 10:35-38. What do you want me to do for you? Can you drink the cup I drink and be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with? Luke 18:35-41. What do you want me to do for you? John 1:35-37. What do you want? And John 5:6. Do you want to get well? Jesus' questions provoke transformation, awareness, and confront the listener with their own thought processes, preconceptions, and beliefs. So if we want to follow Jesus, we need to also learn to ask questions the way Jesus does, which relates to how we do ministry. For instance, some questions that would be helpful for us to ask for our church this year is, what have we learned about who this church is becoming in God's grace? How are our values helping us to understand a new direction? What ministries are not bearing fruit anymore, either due to lack of interest or lack of ability? What is happening in the church that is bearing fruit of the Spirit? Here is an example. We see that not as many people are attending worship services, and we start to worry about the metrics and numbers of folks that don't seem to be showing up. We have option as leaders about how to respond. We can panic and worry that our worship services aren't good enough, or our preaching isn't as good as some other churches, and compare ourselves to others, imagining they have it so much easier or better than we do. This results in defeat and discouragement, and is not the leadership we need right now. We can be realistic and think that we need to just cut back on everything to manage costs and resources, and feel defeatist that we're on a downward trajectory and the decline of the church is out of control. This results in a lack of faith, and also is not the leadership that can move us forward. Or we can live into our values and ask the question that will help us discern who God is helping us to become. We can ask questions like, who is coming to worship? Who is feeling like they belong? And who do I know that might resonate with this, that I could invite to be a part of who God seems to be reaching with this worship? What are our values sharing with us about worship? Are there people who don't feel like they're beloved and God is asking to reach out specifically to them? How are people able to contribute their blessings through worship? Is there something God is asking us to do bravely in or through worship that we are learning? Is there something in worship that is not bearing fruit anymore? Something that is not bearing the fruit of the Spirit? And how do we celebrate what that has been? And also let go of it so something else can grow? What in worship is bearing fruit? How can we make space for that so we can give more energy to it and allow it to grow? When we pay attention to what God is doing and base our decisions of ministry direction on this, then we can be non-reactive and not anxious. We can ask questions that are reflective and lead us into something new. This will require us all to come together collaboratively and creatively to ensure we are listening well to God and learning how God is helping us to become a church for this time and this space of postmodern, post-Christian, and post-pandemic life. So take a moment to think to yourself about how you have seen this church evolve over time. How have we trusted God through the many ups and downs and the highs and lows? God has seen us through it all and helped us to become who we are today. It is because of Christian responses of integrity and steadfast faithfulness that this has happened. Let us continue to lean into this for our future together, knowing that it is in being reflective of who God is and what God is doing that helps us to become the church we need to be for the future.